In 2023, scientists pointed the most advanced scanning technology ever aimed at the Great Pyramid of Giza directly into its stone core. What came back should have been solid. 4,500 years old. Limestone blocks weighing up to 80 tons each. Millions of them. Stacked to a height of 481 feet. The most studied structure in human history, examined, measured, debated, and analyzed by every generation of scholars since ancient Greece. We knew what was inside. Except we didn't. Because the scan came back with something that wasn't supposed to be there. A void. A hidden corridor. 9 meters long. Running directly behind the main entrance of the pyramid, parallel to the descending passage, completely invisible from the outside, completely unknown to every archaeologist, every explorer, every scientist who had studied this structure for 2 centuries of modern investigation. Hidden inside the most examined building on Earth. For 4,500 years. Scientists immediately requested permission to open it. Egypt said no. They're still saying no. And the official reason they're giving doesn't make any sense. So the question, the real question, isn't what's inside that corridor. The question is why someone doesn't want you to find out. Before we go inside the pyramid, we need to establish something. The Great Pyramid of Giza is not mysterious because we don't know enough about it. It's mysterious because the more we learn, the less the official explanation holds together. Every generation of archaeologists has added knowledge. Better tools. Better dating methods. Better scanning technology. Decades of excavation and study and argument. And with every new discovery, with every new piece of information that should be clarifying the picture gets stranger. Not simpler. Stranger. The hidden corridor discovered in 2023 is not an isolated anomaly. It is the latest in a series of discoveries, stretching back decades, some of them centuries, that have been quietly noted, quietly debated, and then quietly set aside. Not because they weren't significant. Because they were too significant. Because some discoveries, if you follow them to their logical conclusion, lead somewhere that the official history of human civilization cannot accommodate. And the people who control access to the pyramid, the Egyptian government, the Supreme Council of Antiquities, the institutional archaeology establishment, have shown a remarkably consistent pattern when confronted with those discoveries. They stop. They delay. They restrict access. They change the subject. This has been happening for longer than most people realize. And the full story, the complete picture of what has been found, what has been hidden, what has been refused, and what might still be waiting inside that stone, is something that no single documentary has ever told in full. Until now. Let's start at the beginning. Not 2023. Not the modern era. Let's start with the first people who went inside and found something they didn't expect. The year is 820 AD. The Caliph of Baghdad, Al-Ma'mun, son of Harun al-Rashid, one of the most powerful rulers of the Islamic Golden Age, has become obsessed with the Great Pyramid. He has heard the ancient legends. Every civilization that has encountered the pyramid has generated legends about what it contains. Roman writers described vast treasure chambers. Early Arab sources spoke of talismans and weapons and the preserved bodies of ancient kings surrounded by jewels. Al-Ma'mun wants to know. He organizes an expedition. Not an archaeological survey in the modern sense, a forced entry. He brings engineers, miners, architects, and laborers to Giza with one mission. Get inside. There was a problem. The original entrance to the pyramid, which exists, and which Arab scholars knew existed, was sealed. Not just blocked. Sealed with massive limestone plugs fitted so precisely that the joints were nearly invisible. Getting through the original entrance would require removing those plugs, which were massive and fitted into a descending passage at an angle that made extraction essentially impossible. Al-Ma'mun's engineers looked at the pyramid. And they started cutting a new hole. They chose the north face, approximately 23 feet below and 25 feet to the west of the actual entrance, and they began cutting directly into the limestone core. The work took months. cutting through limestone blocks with iron tools, removing rubble, shoring up the tunnel behind them as they went. The men worked in cramped, dark, dusty conditions, the tunnel they were cutting barely wide enough for a person to pass through. After approximately 100 feet of cutting, when morale was reportedly failing and Al-Ma'mun was considering abandoning the project, they heard something. A sound from inside the stone. Something falling. Something hollow. They cut toward the sound and broke through into something they hadn't expected. The original descending passage of the pyramid. Whatever had fallen was a limestone block, one of the plugs sealing the ascending passage, that had dislodged from the vibrations of their cutting and fallen into the descending passage. Al-Ma'mun's men looked up. Above them, the ascending passage. Sealed with 3 massive granite plugs, fitted so precisely that they had been completely invisible from below. These plugs were not limestone. They were granite. Harder than anything Al-Ma'mun's iron tools could cut. But the plugs only extended so far. Above the granite, the ascending passage continued upward in limestone. They cut around the granite, through the softer limestone of the pyramid's core, bypassing the plugs that had been specifically designed to stop exactly this kind of intrusion. And they climbed. What Al-Ma'mun's men found as they ascended through the pyramid's internal passages was both more and less than legend had promised. They found the Grand Gallery, a soaring corbelled passage 153 feet long and 28 feet high, its polished limestone walls fitted with a precision that left the Arab engineers stunned. This was not crude construction. The walls of the Grand Gallery are fitted stone surfaces, angled and corbelled with mathematical precision, creating a passageway that is simultaneously architecturally astonishing and apparently purposeless as a mere corridor. You don't build a ceiling 28 feet high for a corridor you're only going to walk through once. They found the King's Chamber, a room of red Aswan granite, 34 feet long, 17 feet wide, 19 feet high. Every surface granite. The ceiling constructed from 9 massive granite slabs, each weighing approximately 25 tons. The total weight pressing down from above, carefully calculated by modern engineers, is approximately 400 tons. And in the King's Chamber, they found a lidless granite sarcophagus. Empty. No lid. No inscription. No mummy. No treasure. No artifacts of any kind. Just a room of red granite and an empty box. Al-Ma'mun, according to legend, though the story may be embellished, was so disappointed by the absence of treasure that he secretly had his men hide some gold inside the pyramid before he announced the opening, so the laborers would feel they had been paid. Whether or not that particular legend is true, the point it makes is real. The official story of the pyramid, that it was a tomb, built to house the body of Pharaoh Khufu, full of treasure that was later looted, had one immediate problem. There was no evidence of burial. No mummy. No funerary goods. No canopic jars. No texts or inscriptions of the kind found in every other royal Egyptian burial. Just an empty room and an empty box. If this was a tomb, it was the strangest tomb in Egyptian history. Which raises a question that Al-Ma'mun apparently didn't ask, or if he asked, didn't answer. If it was never a tomb, what was it? That question, the fundamental question of what the Great Pyramid was actually built for, has been answered in approximately a dozen different ways by different researchers over the past 2 centuries. The official answer remains, tomb. Built by Khufu, 4th dynasty, approximately 2560 BC, as a monument to house his body for eternity. This answer has problems. The first problem is the one Al-Ma'mun encountered. No burial. In thousands of years of Egyptian archaeology, in dozens of excavated royal tombs, there has never been a tomb completely devoid of funerary equipment. Not one. Every burial, from the simplest to the most elaborate, contained something. Food offerings. Canopic jars. Shabti figurines. Inscriptions. The Great Pyramid contained none of these things. The second problem is scale. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. Their average weight is 2.5 to 15 tons each, with some granite blocks in the internal chambers weighing up to 80 tons. The total mass of the structure is approximately 6 million tons. No other tomb in Egyptian history, not the largest, not the most ambitious, approaches this scale. Not even close. The next largest pyramid is roughly 15% of the Great Pyramid's volume. Why would a tomb need to be 6 million tons? The third problem is precision. The Great Pyramid is oriented to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. This is not the north as computed by the star patterns of 2560 BC, this is true geographic north, computed with a precision that modern surveyors using GPS technology consider remarkable. The base of the pyramid is level to within 2.1 centimeters across its entire 230-meter length. 2.1 centimeters across 230 meters of stone construction. Modern construction engineers, asked to replicate this precision, have estimated that it would be extraordinarily difficult even with modern leveling equipment. Why does a tomb need to be oriented to within 0.05 degrees of true north? The fourth problem is the internal geometry. The proportions of the Great Pyramid encode the value of pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, in its dimensions. The perimeter of the pyramid divided by twice its height gives a value extremely close to pi. This could be coincidence. But the pyramid also encodes phi, the golden ratio, in the relationship between its height and the length of its sloping face. Both pi and phi in the same structure. Simultaneously. The probability of this occurring by accident in a structure built by people who were simply trying to make a tomb is low. Something deliberate was happening in the mathematics of this building. And we don't know what. Now let's talk about the systematic exploration of the pyramid's interior over the past 2 centuries. Because this is where the story stops being about ancient mystery and starts being about modern obstruction. In 1837, a British Army officer named Howard Vyse arrived at Giza with a commission to explore the pyramid. He brought gunpowder. Vyse was not a subtle man. His approach to Egyptian archaeology was to blast his way through anything that didn't open voluntarily. He used explosive charges to open sealed chambers, force passages, and investigate areas that previous explorers had not reached. His most significant discovery, and his most controversial, was the set of chambers above the king's chamber. Above the ceiling of the king's chamber are 5 successive spaces, now called relieving chambers, stacked one above the other, apparently designed to distribute the massive weight of the pyramid above the king's chamber and prevent its ceiling from collapsing. Vyse forced his way into these chambers. And in the uppermost one, Campbell's chamber, he found something. Inscriptions. Painted hieroglyphic marks. Red ochre paint. Work gang names, the kind of administrative graffiti that Egyptian laborers scrawled on stones to identify their work group for logistics purposes. One of these inscriptions contained a name. Knumkuf. A variant of Khufu's name. This was the only inscription found anywhere in the entire Great Pyramid, and it was hidden in a chamber that had been sealed for 4,500 years, inaccessible without Vyse's gunpowder. Egyptologists celebrated. Here was proof. The pyramid was Khufu's. The single inscription confirmed it. Critics pointed out something uncomfortable. Howard Vyse was known to have been under enormous pressure. He had spent months at Giza and found nothing significant. His funding was running out. His reputation was at stake. The inscriptions appeared, conveniently, at exactly the moment when Vyse most needed a significant discovery. And the inscriptions themselves had anomalies. The hieroglyphic forms used were inconsistent with the style of the 4th Dynasty period. In a way consistent with someone in the 19th century copying hieroglyphics from a reference book, not with an ancient Egyptian scribe writing in his own language. Egyptologist Samuel Birch noted these anomalies in 1837. They were not resolved then. They have not been resolved since. Was the only inscription inside the Great Pyramid real? Or was it put there in 1837 by a man who desperately needed to find something? We don't know. And the Egyptian authorities have never permitted the kind of independent forensic analysis, paint composition dating, surface microscopy, that would settle the question definitively. The modern era of pyramid investigation began in 1986. A French team, architects and engineers, not Egyptologists, applied a technique called microgravimetry to the Great Pyramid. Microgravimetry measures tiny variations in gravitational pull across a structure's surface. Variations in density, caused by voids, chambers, or passages, show up as anomalies in the data. The French team found anomalies. Specifically, they found evidence of two cavities on the west side of the Queen's chamber, rooms or passages that their instruments suggested existed in the pyramid's core, unknown and unrecorded. They applied to the Egyptian authorities for permission to investigate. Permission was refused. They came back the following year with an upgraded methodology and confirmed their findings. Two voids, approximately 3 meters by 3 meters each, behind the walls of the Queen's chamber. They applied again. Permission was refused again. In 1993, a German robotics engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink received permission to do something different. He wasn't asking to open walls. He was asking to send a small robot, which he called Upuort, after the Egyptian god of exploration, into the narrow shafts that extend from the Queen's chamber upward through the pyramid's core. These shafts, approximately 20 centimeters square, extend at steep angles from both the north and south walls of the Queen's chamber. They had been known about since the 19th century. Their purpose was unknown. They were too small for a person to enter. Gantenbrink's robot could enter. For weeks, the robot traveled up the southern shaft, transmitting video back through a cable, climbing through the narrow stone passage, revealing the perfectly cut interior surface of the shaft for the first time. And then, at a distance of approximately 65 meters from the Queen's chamber, the robot's camera showed something. A small door. A limestone slab, fitted into the shaft like a door, with two copper handles attached to it. A sealed door. At the end of a shaft. Inside the most studied building in history. Never previously known. Gantenbrink was not permitted to go further. He was told to stop. His permit was reviewed. He was eventually effectively barred from the project. The Egyptian authorities took control of the shaft investigation and appointed their own team. It took 9 years, until 2002, for anyone to look beyond that door. The 2002 investigation was televised. The Fox network broadcast it live, with enormous publicity, enormous anticipation, the kind of global audience that only a few events generate. A new robot was sent up the shaft. It reached the small limestone door. It drilled a hole through it. A camera was inserted through the hole. And the world watched as the camera showed what was beyond the door. Another door. A second sealed slab. 8 inches beyond the first. Also with copper fittings. The live broadcast ended. The audience went home. The cameras were turned off. And then, nothing. No follow-up investigation. No further drilling. No explanation of why there were 2 doors rather than 1. No announcement about what lay beyond the second door. The investigation simply stopped. And the Egyptian authorities announced that the shaft project was complete. Complete. With 2 sealed doors and no idea what lay beyond them. The researchers who had been involved gave various explanations. Technical difficulties. Preservation concerns. The need for further planning. The second door has never been opened. It is still there right now. Inside the Great Pyramid. With its copper fittings. Behind its partner. In a shaft whose purpose is unknown. Sealing something that has been sealed for 4,500 years. Waiting. In 2004, a French researcher named Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed a new theory about how the pyramid was built. His theory, based on 3-dimensional computer modeling of the pyramid's internal structure, suggested that the outer ramps used in conventional pyramid construction theory couldn't have worked for the upper sections of the pyramid. The logistics didn't add up. The ramp would have needed to be almost as large as the pyramid itself. Instead, Houdin proposed that the upper sections were built using internal ramps, spiral tunnels running just inside the outer casing of the pyramid, used to raise stones to the upper levels. When he modeled this theory against available data, including microgravimetric data and the known distribution of internal spaces, his model predicted something specific. A large, previously unknown room near the top of the pyramid, at the point where the internal ramp system would have required a turning space for maneuvering large stones. He published this finding. He applied for permission to verify it with scanning technology. He has been waiting for that permission for 20 years. The Egyptian authorities have never said yes. And they have never said why. Now we arrive at 2017. The Scan Pyramids project, an international scientific collaboration involving researchers from France, Japan, Canada, and Egypt, using 4 different non-invasive scanning technologies simultaneously, announces a major discovery. A large void inside the Great Pyramid, above the Grand Gallery, approximately 30 meters long. Previously completely unknown. The announcement is made in the journal Nature. Peer-reviewed. The most prestigious scientific publication in the world. The void is real. It is at minimum 30 meters long and at minimum 2 meters high. Its exact shape, whether it is a single chamber or a series of connected spaces, cannot be determined from outside. Its purpose is unknown. Its existence was completely unsuspected by conventional Egyptology. The team requests permission to investigate further. The Egyptian authorities announce that the Scan Pyramids project is being reviewed. The investigation pauses. And then, in 2023, the same collaboration announces a second discovery. A hidden corridor, 9 meters long, running directly behind the main entrance of the pyramid, at a point that has been examined and walked past by thousands of researchers and millions of tourists for 2 centuries. 9 meters long. Hidden corridor. Never seen. The team requests permission to open it. Egypt says no. The official reason given, preservation concerns. Opening the corridor might damage the structure. This explanation has a problem. The pyramid has survived 4,500 years. It has survived earthquakes, the removal of its outer casing stones in the medieval period, gunpowder excavations in the 19th century, and the vibrations of millions of tourists walking through it annually. A carefully conducted archaeological investigation would be less structurally impactful than any of these. Preservation concerns are not the reason. So what is the reason? To understand what might be inside that corridor, and why its contents might be considered too sensitive to reveal, we need to go back to something we discussed in a previous video. Manetho, the Egyptian high priest who had access to temple archives and wrote a complete history of Egypt that was subsequently lost, edited, and suppressed. Manetho's history described a pre-dynastic Egypt that stretched back tens of thousands of years. Divine rulers. Demigods. A civilization older than anything conventional archaeology acknowledges. The Egyptian priests who preserved those records didn't keep them in papyrus scrolls stored in temples that could burn. They were smarter than that. The Egyptians were the greatest builders in the ancient world. They built in stone. They built for eternity. They built with the explicit intention that what they created would survive longer than any civilization, any empire, any political system. If the priests of ancient Egypt wanted to preserve something permanently, something they considered so important that it had to survive regardless of what happened to Egypt, to Rome, to the Byzantine Empire, to the Arab conquest, to the Ottoman Empire, to the modern world, they wouldn't have put it in a library. They would have put it in stone. The largest, most precisely built, most deliberately over-engineered stone structure in human history. The Great Pyramid is 6 million tons of stone. The largest, most precisely built, most deliberately over-engineered stone structure in human history. The Great Pyramid is 6 million tons of stone. Its internal passages are cut with precision that modern engineers find remarkable. It is oriented to true north with extraordinary accuracy. Its proportions encode mathematical constants. It was not built to the standards of a tomb. It was built to the standards of a vault. A vault designed to survive everything. To be impervious to time, to decay, to conquest, to curiosity. And inside that vault, according to ancient Egyptian tradition, was the record. The complete record of everything. Going back to the beginning. The Egyptians called it the Hall of Records. And they said it was hidden. Not in a temple. Not in a library. Not somewhere convenient. Somewhere that would last forever. The Hall of Records is not a conspiracy theory. It is referenced in ancient Egyptian texts. The concept of a repository of sacred knowledge, hidden, protected, waiting, appears in multiple ancient sources. The Roman writer Iamblichus, writing in the 3rd century AD, references Egyptian traditions of a hidden archive. Medieval Arab sources describe traditions of a vast underground library beneath the Giza Plateau. The American psychic Edgar Cayce, in the 1930s, decades before modern scanning technology, described, in his trance readings, a hall of records beneath the Sphinx, accessible through a passage between the right paw of the Sphinx and the pyramid. He gave specific details about its contents and location. In 1974, geophysicist Lambert Dolphin received permission from the Egyptian government to conduct seismic surveys of the Giza Plateau. His team found anomalies beneath the Sphinx, indications of cavities or tunnels in the bedrock. He was not permitted to investigate further. In 1978, Stanford Research Institute received permission to conduct resistivity surveys of the plateau. They also found anomalies. The largest, most precisely built, most deliberately over-engineered stone structure in human history. The Great Pyramid is 6 million tons of stone. Its internal passages are cut with precision that modern engineers find remarkable. It is oriented to true north with extraordinary accuracy. Its proportions encode mathematical constants. It was not built to the standards of a tomb. It was built to the standards of a vault. A vault designed to survive everything. To be impervious to time, to decay, to conquest, to curiosity. And inside that vault, according to ancient Egyptian tradition, was the record. The complete record of everything. Going back to the beginning. The Egyptians called it the Hall of Records. And they said it was hidden. Not in a temple. Not in a library. Not somewhere convenient. Somewhere that would last forever. The Hall of Records is not a conspiracy theory. It is referenced in ancient Egyptian texts. The concept of a repository of sacred knowledge, hidden, protected, waiting, appears in multiple ancient sources. The Roman writer Iamblichus, writing in the 3rd century AD, references Egyptian traditions of a hidden archive. Medieval Arab sources describe traditions of a vast underground library beneath the Giza Plateau. The American psychic Edgar Cayce, in the 1930s, decades before modern scanning technology, described, in his trance readings, a hall of records beneath the Sphinx, accessible through a passage between the right paw of the Sphinx and the pyramid. He gave specific details about its contents and location. In 1974, geophysicist Lambert Dolphin received permission from the Egyptian government to conduct seismic surveys of the Giza Plateau. His team found anomalies beneath the Sphinx, indications of cavities or tunnels in the bedrock. He was not permitted to investigate further. In 1978, Stanford Research Institute received permission to conduct resistivity surveys of the plateau. They also found anomalies. Also beneath the Sphinx. Also consistent with the presence of underground cavities. They were not permitted to investigate further. In 1991, the same year that geologist Robert Schoch published his water erosion analysis of the Sphinx, a seismic survey conducted by Boston University researchers found evidence of cavities beneath the Sphinx enclosure floor. Rectangular in shape. Approximately 9 meters by 12 meters. Rectangular natural cavities don't exist in limestone. Rectangular voids in rock are made. The Egyptian authorities were notified. A press conference was scheduled. The press conference was cancelled. The researchers were told that further investigation of the area was not permitted. And the Supreme Council of Antiquities issued a statement saying that the anomalies were natural geological features. Natural geological features. Rectangular. In limestone. Exactly where ancient tradition said a hidden archive would be. The investigation stopped. And it has never resumed. Let's talk about the human reality of what it means to be on the other side of this. Imagine you are a researcher. You have spent years, decades, working toward a single goal. Understanding the Great Pyramid. Understanding the Sphinx. Understanding the true origins of Egyptian civilization. You have legitimate credentials. A university position. Peer-reviewed publications. A reputation built on careful, methodical work. And you have found something. Not a theory. Not speculation. Actual data. Numbers. Readings from instruments that don't lie. Anomalies in the ground, in the stone, that cannot be explained by the official account of what the pyramid is. You write the papers. You submit the applications. You attend the meetings. You make your case, carefully, professionally, with full documentation, to the authorities who control access. And you wait. The answer comes back, no. No explanation. No counter-evidence. No scientific argument for why your findings are wrong. Just, no. You try again. Different approach. Different technology. Different framing. You find collaborators. You build a larger team. You secure more funding. You come back with better data. No. You watch other researchers go through the same process. Different people. Different countries. Different methodologies. The same data. The same applications. The same answer. No. You start to realize that the rejection is not scientific. There is no scientific argument being made against your findings. The findings are not being disputed. They are being ignored. And then you start to wonder, not as a conspiracy theorist, but as a scientist who has been told no for 20 years without a scientific reason, what exactly is being protected? What is in there that someone has decided the world is not ready to see? There is one researcher whose story captures this experience more completely than any other. His name is John Anthony West. West was not a credentialed academic. He was an independent scholar, a writer, an Egyptologist in the self-taught tradition, a man who spent decades studying Egyptian civilization with the specific focus of understanding the Sphinx. He had read the work of French scholar R.A. Schwaller de Lubic's, who in the 1950s had noted what appeared to be water erosion on the body of the Sphinx, vertical erosion channels that suggested rainfall, not wind-driven sand. West became convinced this was important. He spent years trying to get the academic establishment to take it seriously. He was ignored. In 1990, he persuaded Robert Schoch, a legitimate geologist with academic credentials, to come to Giza and look at the Sphinx with fresh eyes. Schoch looked and agreed with West. The erosion was from water. Heavy, prolonged rainfall. The Sphinx was older than it should be. West was there when Schoch presented his findings at the 1992 Geological Society of America conference. He was there when the audience of geologists, who evaluated the geological argument purely on its merits, accepted Schoch's methodology and findings as sound. He was there when the Egyptologists responded. Not with counter-evidence. Not with a geological argument. With personal attacks on Schoch's credentials. With assertions that the geological findings must be wrong because they contradicted established chronology. With the argument, essentially, that the geology was incorrect because the history said it was incorrect. Science being rejected not by science, but by history. West spent the rest of his life trying to get anyone with access, to investigate the cavities beneath the Sphinx. The rectangular voids. The possible Hall of Records. He died in 2018. The voids beneath the Sphinx have never been excavated. Now let's compare this pattern to other situations in which potentially significant archaeological sites have been restricted or controlled. The Vatican archives, the largest archive of historical documents in the world, remained substantially closed to outside researchers until 1881, when Pope Leo XIII opened portions of it. Even today, specific sections remain restricted. Ancient documents that might challenge established religious chronology are controlled by an institution with an obvious interest in what those documents say. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, containing ancient Jewish and early Christian texts, were controlled by a small team of scholars for nearly 40 years. The full publication of the scrolls was not completed until 1991. During those 40 years, researchers who applied to see the originals were routinely denied access. The official reason was preservation. The actual reason, many argued, was that some scrolls contained material that complicated established religious and historical narratives. The Nazca's lines in Peru, vast geoglyphs visible only from the air, created by a culture with no known aerial capability, whose purpose remains officially unexplained, are protected by strict no-excavation zones. Peruvian authorities control access tightly. Researchers who have found evidence suggesting the lines encode astronomical data beyond what the conventional timeline allows have found their access restricted. The pattern is consistent across cultures, across centuries, across institutions. When a discovery has the potential to fundamentally challenge the official account of human history, the timeline, the capabilities, the origins, access to that discovery is restricted. Not always. Not everywhere. But consistently enough to be a pattern. And the Great Pyramid, where the restrictions are most systematic, most long-standing, and most impervious to scientific argument, is the center of that pattern. So let's now put the complete picture together. What do we actually know? We know the pyramid contains at least 3 significant unknown spaces: the large void above the Grand Gallery discovered in 2017, the hidden corridor behind the main entrance discovered in 2023, and the unknown spaces behind the Queen's Chamber walls identified by microgravimetry in 1986. We know that the ground beneath the Sphinx contains rectangular cavities, identified by 3 separate scientific surveys using 3 different methodologies that are consistent with constructed underground chambers. We know that access to investigate any of these findings has been repeatedly denied without scientific justification. We know that the only inscription ever found inside the Great Pyramid has authenticity questions that have never been resolved because forensic testing has never been permitted. We know that the pyramid's construction precision, mathematical encoding, and astronomical alignment are inconsistent with the characteristics of a simple tomb. We know that ancient Egyptian tradition, and multiple ancient sources, describe a repository of sacred knowledge hidden beneath or within the pyramid complex. We know that independent researchers who have found evidence consistent with that tradition have been systematically blocked from investigating further. What does this add up to? It adds up to a picture in which something inside the Giza complex, something that has been there for at least 4,500 years, possibly much longer, is being protected. Not carelessly protected. Not incidentally protected. Deliberately. Systematically. With the consistent application of institutional authority across generations of researchers, across different governments and political systems, across decades of technological advancement that has made the existence of these spaces impossible to deny but their contents still impossible to access. Someone knows what's in there. Or suspects what's in there. And has decided that the world is not ready to know. The hidden corridor discovered in 2023 is 9 meters long. 9 meters is not large. It's about the length of a standard school bus. It's a space that a person could walk the full length of in approximately 10 seconds. But size is not the point. The point is what 9 meters of hidden space at the entrance of the Great Pyramid represents. It represents a deliberate architectural decision. Someone, 4,500 years ago, building the most precisely engineered structure in human history, chose to include this space and then conceal it. Not from later builders. The concealers were the builders. They built the corridor and they sealed it. Simultaneously. As part of the original design. There is no innocent explanation for a deliberately hidden room. You don't hide something unless you don't want it found. You don't hide something inside 6 million tons of stone unless you want it to stay hidden for a very long time. And you don't refuse, for 2 years, to let scientists investigate a 9-meter corridor unless you have a reason. A reason that has nothing to do with preservation. What is the Egyptian government afraid of finding? There are essentially 3 possibilities. The first possibility is that the hidden spaces contain conventional archaeological material, funerary goods, inscriptions, artifacts consistent with the official 4th dynasty dating. In this scenario, the discovery would be magnificent but unsurprising. It would confirm the conventional account. It would be the archaeological discovery of the century, celebrated globally, studied exhaustively, published immediately. There would be no reason to delay. No reason to restrict. Every reason to open. The Egyptian government has delayed for 2 years. They have not opened a corridor whose discovery they have acknowledged and whose existence they cannot deny. This would be catastrophic for conventional archaeology. It would invalidate decades of established scholarship. It would require the rewriting of textbooks worldwide. It would create a historiographical crisis of the first order. It would also, and this is the part that matters to governments, raise immediate questions about land rights, cultural heritage claims, and the political implications of civilizations that predate the currently recognized earliest civilizations. The third possibility is the most extreme. The third possibility is that the hidden spaces contain what the ancient Egyptian tradition said they contain. Records. A complete archive. Documents not on papyrus, but on materials designed to last. Stone tablets. Metal plates. Something engineered to survive 10,000 years in a sealed stone vault. Documents describing a civilization that predates anything in the current historical timeline. A civilization with knowledge, astronomical, mathematical, architectural, that the official account of human development cannot explain. Documents that would not just rewrite history. They would rewrite the human story. Completely. The story of who we are. How long we have been here. What we knew. What we lost. What we are still capable of. The Egyptian government, and any institution connected to it, would have every reason in the world to pause before opening that door. Because once it's open, you can't close it again. Here is what I believe, based not on speculation but on the documented evidence we've gone through in this video. The Great Pyramid is not primarily a tomb. The evidence for this, the absence of burial, the extraordinary precision, the mathematical encoding, the astronomical alignment, is overwhelming and has never been satisfactorily explained by the tomb theory. The Great Pyramid was built to house something. Something considered so important, so valuable, so essential to preserve that the builders constructed the most durable structure in human history specifically to contain it. The hidden spaces inside the pyramid, the corridor, the large void, the sealed shafts, are not accidents of construction. They were designed deliberately by people who understood exactly what they were building and why. The systematic restriction of access to these spaces, across decades, across governments, across scientific disciplines, is not about preservation. It is about control. Control of information. Control of a discovery that, once made public, cannot be controlled at all. And the discovery that is being controlled is this. Human civilization is older than we've been told. The people who built the Great Pyramid were not primitive. They were not using basic tools and motivated by religious ideology to build a glorified tombstone. They were sophisticated. Mathematically. Astronomically. Architecturally. In ways that the conventional timeline of human intellectual development cannot accommodate. And they left a record. Inside the most durable structure ever built. Waiting for a civilization advanced enough to find it. And brave enough to open it. We have found it. The bravery part, that's what's still in question. The hidden corridor is 9 meters long. It has been sitting there for 4,500 years. It has survived earthquakes and conquests and the stripping of the pyramid's outer casing and Napoleon's artillery practice and the vibrations of 8 million tourists per year. It is not going anywhere. And somewhere in Cairo, in the offices of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, people are having conversations that the rest of the world is not invited to. Conversations about what to do. About whether to open the door. About what happens to history, to religion, to politics, to the human story, when they do. Those conversations have been happening for 2 years. They may continue for another decade. Or they may end tomorrow. And when they end, when the decision is finally made and someone walks into that 9-meter corridor with a camera and a light, the world will change. Not because of what the corridor contains, but because of what it means that it was hidden. So here is the question I want to leave you with. If tomorrow, literally tomorrow, the Egyptian government announced that they had opened the hidden corridor and found a sealed chamber containing records in an unknown script, inscribed on materials that dated to 10,000 BC, what would you want to happen next? Would you want those records published immediately? Everything. No filter. No institutional review. No government oversight. Just the raw information, released to the entire world simultaneously. Or would you want someone, some institution, some authority, to evaluate what the records contain before the world sees them? And if you choose the second option, if you think someone should evaluate it first, who do you trust to make that decision? Because that question, the question of who gets to decide what humanity knows about itself, is the question that every hidden corridor, every sealed chamber, every restricted excavation is really asking. It was asked when Al-Ma'mun blasted his way into the pyramid in 820 AD. It was asked when Howard Vyse used gunpowder in 1837. It was asked when Gantenbrink's robot found a sealed door in 1993. It is being asked right now. By the people in Cairo who are deciding whether to open a 9-meter corridor. Leave your answer in the comments. Because this is not an abstract question. This is the most important question in archaeology. And the answer, whatever it is, will define what kind of civilization we actually are. And next, we're going somewhere that connects directly to everything we discussed in this video and the last one. Because if there is a hall of records beneath Giza, if there is a complete archive of pre-dynastic Egyptian civilization hidden in the bedrock of the plateau, then there is a second question that nobody is asking. Who put it there? Not which pharaoh. Not which dynasty. Who, specifically, made the decision to build a vault, fill it with the complete record of their civilization, seal it inside 6 million tons of stone, and then arrange for that knowledge to be encoded in the proportions of the structure itself, so that whoever eventually found it would know, immediately, that what they were looking at was not natural. That it was a message. Designed to be found. By us. That video, the full investigation of who actually built the Great Pyramid, what civilization they came from, and what they were trying to tell us, is the next chapter of this story. And I promise you, it goes deeper than anything we've discussed so far.